Hello everybody, you're welcome back again to the Reggae Appreciation Society. One night in 1966, a 20-year-old young lady named Rita Anderson convinced her then 21-year-old homeless boyfriend named Robert or Robbie Marley to sneak in and pass the night in the one room that she shared with her cousin and baby. And while they were fast asleep, Rita's very strict aunt, who owned the house, came into the room and discovered the young man. She was furious as Rita was forbidden from even talking to members of the opposite sex. How much more harbor one under her roof? She kicked the couple out that night and made them sleep outside under the stars. But when she tried to break up that relationship, young Rita would for the first time stand up to her auntie and threatened to elope with him. And eventually her auntie would back down as she saw that her niece was really in love. This incident would be the first of numerous examples of the fierce love shared between Rita Marley and her eventual husband, Bob Marley. There are many incredible stories in the colorful history of reggae music, but the awesome tale of this incredible woman is simply on a different level. She rose from unbelievably hard beginnings to become one of the pillars of one of the greatest music machines in history, as well as the wife and the backbone of one of the greatest artists, and indeed among the most influential figures that the world has ever seen. But even at the peak of success, she would weather the same storms in a private life that the same success had inflicted on what had been a dream romance with the Tuff Gong. Her endurance would receive the ultimate test, with becoming a widow at 35 and facing off against titanic forces looking to dismember her late husband's legacy and assets, while holding the entire Marley clan together, just as Bob would have wanted. But she would still prove her own mettle as a solo artist after the passing of her husband. Let's take a look at the inspiring story of Sister Rita Marley, the matriarch of the Marley Empire. She was born Rita Constantia Anderson in Santiago de Cuba on the lovely island of Cuba on July 25, 1946, to carpenter and musician Leroy Anderson and her mother Cynthia Jarrett. Her family moved to Jamaica when she was just a few months old, and the Andersons would settle in Kingston. She was the apple of her father's eye and would inherit his flair for music, winning a radio talent contest for kids at the age of 5. It was all fine and good, but when she turned 5 years old, her mother would leave her dad for another man and move to England a few years later. It wasn't long before her dad also left for the UK in search of greener pastures, and Rita was taken in by her father's sister Viola Anderson at a house at 18A Greenwich Park Road in Trenchtown. Young Rita grew up sad at being abandoned by her mother, but Aunt Viola, who didn't have kids of her own, took great care of her and always told her that she would be great one day, showering her with love as well as lots of discipline. Her name Rita was officially shortened to Rita when her aunt enrolled her at Central Branch Government School, as her name was too long for the school register. She was a keen student, ambitious and driven with a great flair for music. Music and singing had always been a favorite pastime in the Anderson house. But when her cousin Constantine Dream Walker moved in with them, the pair began to harmonize and practice singing almost every day. And they got so good that they would even hold shows in their yard and charge people pennies to come and watch them. After leaving high school at 17, she enrolled at the Bethesda School of Nursing in Kingston and was set to begin a career as a nurse when she got pregnant for her then boyfriend named Wesley. Wesley's mother thought that having a baby as a teenager would derail his life path, so she sent him to England, leaving Rita all by herself. Many people told her to get rid of it, but with her aunt's encouragement, she kept it and gave birth to a baby girl that she named Sharon at the age of 19. And while waiting for a nursing job to come through, she and her cousin Dream would continue their steady singing practice. A friend of hers from high school named Marlene Gifford often stopped by to hang out and play with her baby. And Marlene also had a good voice, and in no time, they formed a fine trio and began to nurse dreams of entering the music business one day. Around that time, the music industry in Jamaica was simply exploding with energy, with several groups ruling the airwaves on the island. Rita and her mates' favorite stars were Toots and the Maytals, the Paragons, Ken Booth, and especially a group called the Wailers. These Wailers were Trenchtown based and even recorded at a studio called Studio One that wasn't far from where Rita lived. Rita and her crew, who always fantasized about becoming recording artists themselves, were over the moon when they found out that the Wailers used to walk by their house every day on their way to Studio One. She was very eager to meet them and get advice on how to become an artist herself. And every evening, she would stand outside and wait for them to walk by and would wave at them excitedly every time. But one day, they all stopped and waved back. and the tallest in the group would leave the other two and walked over to introduce himself as Winston Hubert McIntosh, and would also introduce the other two as Bunny and Robbie. She and her cousin devised a plan to sing for the Wailers the next time they passed, and when they did, it impressed the Wailers a great deal, so much so that they invited them over to come on audition at Coxsone Dodd Studio One. But Rita didn't take their invite very seriously. But later on, a family friend that knew Coxsone Dodd pulled some strings, and Rita, Dream and Marlene were taken to see the producer and show him what they could do. Coxsone Dodd asked Bob to play the guitar while they sang. He was impressed by what he heard and took them on the spot, and they christened that trio the Soulettes in the mold of Motown group the Marvelettes. They were still quite raw, so Coxsone Dodd appointed Bob as their mentor. In those early days at the studio, Rita was closest to Peter than Bob or Bunny, and I dare say she liked Bob the least, as he was a very serious and almost harsh teacher. But over time, she warmed up to him, and the pair started dating and fell in love. And at Studio One, she would cut several singles as backup artists and also in duets with members of the Wailers. At the time, Bob was homeless and was sleeping rough in a public kitchen close by. The couple would spend lots of intimate times over there. But Rita couldn't stand Bob living that way and would force him to come and sleep over in the small room she shared with her cousin Dream and her baby Sharon at her auntie's house. But the first time Bob would try and spend the night there, Rita's auntie caught on to what was going on and kicked the couple out that night. That should have been the end of the relationship, but they were deeply and madly in love, and Rita would confront Aunt Viola and give her an ultimatum. Either she left her and Bob alone, or Rita would leave the house and never come back. Seeing how serious her niece was, she built a shack right next door to her house for the couple to live in together. In those days, the Wailers were on bad terms with Coxsone Dodd over money matters, as they were still poor despite their music selling well all over Jamaica, and soon after they would part ways with Studio One, and Bob would soon after propose to Rita, and the couple got married in February 1966. 2 days later, Bob would leave for America with the aim of hustling for some money to fund the Wailers' independent project, and Rita would continue her musical career and job at Studio One in Bob's absence. That was the rocksteady era, but very soon, a once-in-a-lifetime event would not only change her life, but also the entire direction of Jamaican music forever. On April 21st that same year, Emperor Haile Selassie would visit Jamaica, an unprecedented and historic event that's celebrated by Rastafarians today as Ground Nation Day. It will cause the popularity of the Rastafarian faith to skyrocket in Jamaica, and many musicians would also convert, with Rita Marley being among the first. She was among the crowd of the thousands of people who were at the airport to welcome him, and as Selassie's motorcade passed by, she saw a vision that convinced her of his divinity.
Passing, I said, boy, if I could only see his hand, because looking at him still, I saw that power, because as I looked at him, his head turned around to me, and I was looking straight at him. And I said, if only he could just make us see his hand. I was so excited, and as I said that to myself, he did his hand like this. And when I looked into his hand, there was the nail print, the mark, that black mark, in the center of his hand. So, I said, what? That, and I just turned over my head. And, he went like this and gave a nod, and turned the other side. And so I said, my God, this is the man. And, I was screaming and telling my friend that this is him.
And almost immediately became a Rastafarian under the guidance of Rasta leader Mortimer Plano, and Bunny Wailer and Peter Tosh would soon follow suit. And when Bob returned, he also embraced that faith, and the focus of their music would pivot to what we now know as roots reggae. The Wailers would hustle non-stop to establish themselves after leaving Studio One, and Rita became an unofficial fourth member of the Wailers as a backup singer and also working in the record store that they put together in those very challenging times. But by 1972, a huge breakthrough would come when the group signed to Island Records and released the critically acclaimed album Catch a Fire. But as things were looking up career-wise, there was chaos on the home front, as Bob's rising star would coincide with a slew of extramarital affairs. By 1973, Bunny Wailer and Peter Tosh had quit the Wailers over the politics at Island Records, leaving Bob all alone to reconfigure his band. And he gave Rita the task of putting a backup singing group together, and she would recruit Marshall Griffiths and Judy Mowards into what would become known as the I3. And that lovely trio made their debut on the Natty Dread album that came out in 1974. and the sweetening effects of the incredible and lovely vocals would become one of the pillars that made the new Bob Marley and the Wailers the unstoppable juggernaut that it became in the 1970s. But amidst all the success and bright lights, Bob and Rita's marriage was deeply troubled, with infidelity heavy on both sides. But in a very strange way, both of them had a strong devotion to each other that would transcend even their marital vows. And Rita was right there the night armed gunmen attacked Bob's house at 56 Hope Road and was shot in the head as she was leaving with her children in a car during the attack. But through it all, her love for her husband never wavered. Her life with the Tuff Gong would end after 15 years when he passed away from cancer in 1981 at the age of 36. A devastating and unthinkable loss for her, as she was now a widow at the age of 35. She had released her debut album, Who Feels It Knows It, a year before Bob passed in 1980, a sensational classic that's up there among the great roots reggae albums of the 20th century. She had contributed to what were some of reggae's greatest compilations with Bob Marley and the Wailers, but I truly believe that she might have been one of the astounding artists of reggae's golden era if she had done more solo work in the 1970s. She released what would become her biggest hit single, One Draw, in 1981, a controversial herb anthem which became a commercial smash hit in both Jamaica and overseas, but would be banned from the radio in most places, just like Touch's Legalize It a few years earlier. It was that single that powered her next album, Harambe, that came out in 1982. But as she was forging ahead as a solo act, she would become saddled in the humongous legal battle that erupted in the wake of Bob's death. Bob Marley had passed on without a will, and she would become the target of several lawsuits by several interests, all looking for a piece of her late husband's massive empire. It was a huge battle that went on for 3 decades before she eventually won it. But during those years, she did an amazing job of navigating all those problems while ensuring that Bob's 11 children from different women stayed united as one indivisible clan. Not to mention managing, promoting and pushing her children's band, Ziggy Marley and the Melody Makers, a group that would win 3 Grammys and 5 nominations over 2 decades. All this while releasing 9 albums as a solo act, as well as 3 albums with the I3s between 1982 and 2006. And over time, the Marley empire has grown into a $200 million machine and still growing. And this increased responsibility has forced her to do less music and focus more on the business. She fulfilled a lifelong dream when she moved to Ghana in the 1990s, and over there she would establish a non-profit organization called the Rita Marley Foundation, and she became a Ghanaian citizen in 2013 and was given the Ghanaian name of Nana Afua Abodia. Putting it mildly, I find her story incredible and really inspiring. She's lived through unthinkable challenges and has been through several life journeys that most people couldn't handle, and is today celebrated as the first lady of reggae music. She just turned 77 and is truly among the bona fide legends of reggae music. She may be first and foremost and forever known as Rita Marley, the wife of Bob Marley, but truly she's an icon all by herself, with a life story that is as inspirational as anything that we will ever see. Truly a legendary figure whose life story deserves a movie of its own. So there you have it. Thank you for watching the video today. Please leave a like, subscribe, and until next time, God bless.